Gartrell, and we just finished watching Monkey on a Stick, Murder, Madness, and the Hare Krishnas. I'm delighted to welcome the filmmaker, Jason Lapeyre, and Nori Muster, the documentary subject in and historical advisor to the film. Okay, let's get started. Let's start at the beginning. Jason, how did you learn first about ISKON, and why did you decide to make this film?
Yeah, thanks, David. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the screening. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here. I read the book that the film is based on in the year 2000, well before I was a professional filmmaker, and it blew my mind. I was shocked by my very superficial understanding of what the Krishnas were. And, you know, like most people, I think I thought of them as this non-materialistic, you know, peaceful, you know, retreat from the material world group. And then to read this book about how they had essentially acted like organized crime for a long period of time was just unbelievable to me. And I thought it would make a great movie. But this was years before I was able to do anything about it. And so, you know, many years later, 2016, where I was actually in a position to be able to do something about it, I approached the authors, convinced them to let me option the book from them. And I learned at that time that many people had tried to make a film out of the book in the past, including Robert De Niro had the option to make the film at one point. And thank God he wasn't able to pull it together. Yeah, so, and the original idea was to do a dramatic version of the story. And then I started working with the production company Sphere that we made the film with. And it was their suggestion that we make a documentary first as a way to one day do that. And so we are now in the process of trying to get a dramatic TV series off the ground inspired by the documentary.
And how did you get Nori involved?
Yeah, so in the process of raising the money to do the documentary, we made a sizzle reel, which is where you make a kind of a fake trailer for the documentary. And for that, I interviewed John, and I said to John, I'd really like to, as the other interview for the sizzle reel, I'd like to interview a female devotee, because I knew I wanted to make it a really important part of the documentary. You know, in my opinion, one of the fatal flaws of the movement was their belief that men were superior to women. And so I really wanted to hear from a former female devotee. And so John suggested Nori. And in the course of interviewing her for this sizzle reel, she just casually was mentioning what a unique position she had had in the movement, working, you know, in this communications capacity and hearing, you know, so many of the things that she was being asked to keep from a lot of the other devotees. And I thought this is a really, really special perspective. And the more we worked on it together, Nori really became, you know, almost like a co-author of the thing. She led me to most of the other people we interviewed, and her, you know, editorial viewpoint was really aligned with mine in the process of making the film.
Nori, why did you agree to help Jason? Did you have any apprehensions? I mean, you have a complicated history with this group. How did the filmmaking process play out for you?
I was really excited about it, and it was really fun to go down and see John again, because I'd known him since 1988. It was good to see him, and I just trusted Jason. I've been in a couple of other documentaries, but this one seemed really special because it was based on the book Monkey on a Stick. And that book, when I read that book in 1988, that was what kind of made me want to leave the organization, because for the first time, I could realize that it was systemic crime. And so the book really kind of opened my eyes to what was going on. And I just wanted to support John, and he helped me with my book. And we wrote the same book, just from different perspectives of the 1980s in Hare Krishna. So I thought, I just want to do it. It seemed like it would happen, you know. And then COVID happened after we made the reel, and we had all this support built up, and then COVID, everything just shut down for a couple of years. But then we got back to it,
yeah,
and it all worked out.
Jason, your film blends documentary techniques with dramatization. As a viewer, there were brief moments where I was unsure which one was happening. And then, of course, it all comes to a head when Nori pays a visit to her younger self. Could you talk a little bit about your approach to telling the story in this way?
Yeah, so that's actually from the book. So if anyone here has read the book, there are long passages of the book where the authors chose to dramatize some of the history. And it was all, they're both investigative journalists, so it's all thoroughly researched and footnoted, but they chose to use like a, fiction prose mode. And for me, those felt like the most truthful parts of the book, because they were the parts of the story where I got angriest, because I just think fiction has that power, dramatization has that power to make us feel things. And so, there was a sort of a experimental philosophical idea behind that of like, why should documentary have, sole proprietary ownership of like truth, and whereas this idea that like documentaries are true and fiction is false somehow, I don't believe that. I think you can say things that are true in fiction, and it tied in for me in some way in the Krishna consciousness idea that like the whole world is an illusion. You know what I mean? That this idea that like if you can look past the illusory world, you can see the truth behind it, and it just felt like there was some way of expressing that by mixing and matching documentary and fiction, and kind of like asking viewers to like see this artificial boundary between them. And that sort of all comes to a head at the end of the film in this scene where Nori sort of meets her younger self. That was kind of like supposed to be the ultimate sort of playing with documentary and fiction that way.
Nori, what was it like for you filming that scene?
Oh, it was really fun. I really loved it. Yeah, Jason let me rewrite the things, so we worked on that together.
Yeah, I pitched her the idea, and then she agreed to it. I wouldn't have done it if she hadn't agreed to it. And then I sent her a script, and she rewrote the script, and we kind of like agreed together on what it was going to look like.
We worked together on a lot of the things like that. Yeah, it was really good, and Cassie Davidson was amazing, and I was so proud of her. Like,
that's the actress who plays young.
She was the one who played Nandini. That was my name in ISKON, and she was just like, we did some extra filming that didn't go in the movie, but at the end when they were done with, we did that over and over and over, and then when he said, well, we still have some time left, so he just let Cassie and me talk like spontaneously. And I was telling her, you have to get out before they kill these people. You'll be so much happier if you leave now. And then we were both crying, and it was really amazing.
Yeah, there was this really beautiful moment where the actress spontaneously forgave Nori for what had happened.
Yeah.
And they both started crying. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
We tried to put it in the cut, but it was just
too long.
Yeah, it was just too jarring,
Yeah.
a change from what was there, and so.
Yeah.
It was too bad. Maybe it'll be like a special feature on the Blu-ray or something.
I was really happy that my younger self would be willing to leave if I had gone back and talked to her. So yeah, I loved that. It was really fun to do.
It seems like your role in the filmmaking process sort of expanded as the filmmaking went on.
He's really easy to work with, this guy. Yeah, he kept encouraging me, like, no, that's okay. And I would send him this feedback and go, oh, that's okay. And so it all worked out really well. It was the first time I've ever been in a movie, where I helped make it. And it's really hard to make it completely accurate because you just have the footage to go with. And if you don't have the stuff that you need to tell the story, it's going to maybe not be told exactly. Like when Jacob said that the Matchless Gifts was abandoned. It wasn't abandoned, it was for lease. That's why it was empty. And so, some people didn't, but, it's just a minor little thing, So there were a lot of things like that. But I really enjoyed making the movie. And I like how it turned out.
I definitely didn't want to tell a story about Nori. I wanted to tell a story with Nori, about her experience.
That was it, because I didn't want to be the main person, but Ashley Gilmore was the post editor.
One of the editors, yeah.
One of the editors, but she came up to me at the premiere and said, I crafted your character in the movie, and I thought, oh, that's how it happened. Okay, and then I just thought, she's so awesome. She's a Canadian post editor, really nice person, real open, and I thought she has a lot of experience, and she's really good at what she does. So I went, all right, I was all right with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving along, Nori, you wrote your own account of your time with ISKON, with Betrayal of the Spirit, my life behind the headlines of the Hare Krishna movement, which first came out in 1997. What has it been like seeing the more public aspects of the story told by others, maybe not just Jason?
How the people review it?
Well, how the story's been told. I mean, you sort of released your own version of the story into the world, which is mixed with your own experiences, your own personal life, but how has it been seeing the public get other versions of the story?
Well, the book was, I think that, like, in the book, it was, I told, like, what was going on there, and I don't think, no one in ISKON would read it. They won't read Monkey on a Stick, they won't watch Monkey on a Stick, they won't read my book, the people in ISKON. So forget about them, you know, they just live in a bubble there. But I think, you know, I've had a lot of people write to me that they read the book and they were thinking about joining ISKON, but then they read my book and they want my advice and stuff like that. So it wasn't like a big bestseller. It sold pretty well, but it wasn't like a big bestseller like Monkey on a Stick. But I do get a lot of emails from people who, you know, want to know more about ISKON or what they went through. They want to tell me their story. And that's good, because I'm a researcher and I like to listen to people's stories. And I think I've met practically everyone that ever read my book. So they write to me. So, and that's fun. I don't care if it wasn't a big seller. You know.
Well, Jason, as Nori mentioned, ISKON is still around as an organization. Have you heard anything from them?
Yeah, we were waiting with bated breath for their response to the film. So they put out a statement. Weirdly, they put out a statement at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve. So it didn't seem like maybe they did that to not attract attention to the film. But in the statement, they sort of like, accuse us of sort of journalistic untruthfulness and misleading factual assertions in the film. They don't actually respond to any of the things that we say in the end titles of the film. We talk about how they now have training to prevent abuses, but none of that training is mandatory. For example, like they don't address that issue at all. And so it felt to me like they sidestepped a lot of the genuine criticisms we had. I mean, look, the bigger issue for me is I don't think. Like, yes, the film is literally about the Hare Krishna movement, but in a bigger way, the film is about human nature, and the film is about, thinking critically about leadership, and thinking critically about the organizations that we find ourselves in, and deciding for yourself what's right or wrong, rather than being told to believe what's right or wrong. So, I wish they had a sort of bigger perspective on it, and what's in the film is documented history. So I think that organization has a reckoning to do with its own past in order to sort of move forward in a healthier way. But yeah, look, they're still around, they're still thriving, and the film hasn't really, I don't think, made a dent in their operations, unfortunately. So.
Jason, at a critical point in the film, we learned that Steve Bryant had bribed somebody from the archives, and he got a microfiche of Prabhupada's letters. So I'm curious, what, if any, role do primary sources like archives play in developing a story for you? This may be a self-interested question.
Yeah, it's a very self-interested question. I see you, David. They're unbelievably important, and I mean, it is certainly the position of the film that history is something you cannot whitewash and you can't forget it. And in fact, Hinduism as a belief system, the film is not interested in attacking that. I think it's a beautiful worldview with profound insight about human existence. And for me, I think maybe the most beautiful insight is this idea of life as a cycle, and this idea that the accumulation of your life experiences is something that is retained, that energy is somehow retained and has to be processed before there can be forward movement. And so the idea of a historical archive where we keep history and protect it and review it and try to learn from it is an important part of, I think, completing that cycle. And so, as I tell many people, this version of the film is the feature film version. The version that's streaming on AMC in the US and Amazon in the UK is slightly edited. And I prefer this version, but the version that's streaming ends with a quote from Nori that I love, that we filmed in the archive here at UCSB, where she says, you know, standing in front of her archive, she says, you know, if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's what ISKON is doing. They're not learning from their history. And she sums it up by saying, and that's karma. And I thought that was just such a beautiful way to synthesize the story and the religious ideas behind Hinduism.
Nori, as mentioned, your journey with ISKON began here at UCSB as an undergraduate back in 1978, I believe.
Yeah, I came here in 77.
It must feel kind of full circle to be back here.
It is.
Can you take us maybe back to Isla Vista in the 70s and then maybe say something about what it's like to be here now?
Yeah, I lived in, things were a lot different here. There was no Goleta, there was just a freeway and a gas station, and that's all that there was out here. So you just, you know, drive into the campus, and I got an apartment in Isla Vista, with $90 a month. Sorry about that. And so I would walk to school, and they had buses that would pick you up and take you to school too. And so the Hare Krishnas opened a preaching center really close to campus in Isla Vista. And then I had this friend at the Starlight bookstore, Philip Shantz, who told me, he was a monk at the mission here. And so he worked at the Starlight bookstore, so he told me, well, the Hare Krishnas are going to open a preaching center here, and I think you would really like them because your philosophy is a lot like theirs. So, you know, when they're going to have their Sunday feast, you got to go over there. So that's how I met them. I knocked on the door, and that's how I met the devotees. And then after that, they just were like, they saw that I was really vulnerable to be able to join their group. Like, they can spot you a mile away, you know, if you're going to be a good, you know, the kind of person that would join. So they put a lot of energy into trying to get me to join. And then the day after graduation, well, at graduation, I was wearing a sari with a mortarboard hat. And the next day, I packed up my car and drove to the Los Angeles temple. And then I was there for 10 and a half years. And
Steve Gelberg, who appears in the film The Bearded Man, he was the devotee in Isla Vista who sort of brought Nori into the movement, and sort of they talked a lot about the philosophy, and that's how you sort of learned about Krishna consciousness, was from Steve.
Yeah, he was traveling. He was a writer for the organization. He mostly wrote books, or he wrote the introductions to their books and things like that. And so he was kind of independent. So when the people, after Prabhupada died, they came back from India and they were going up the California coast to sell their books to libraries. And then he said, I think I'll stay here in Isla Vista. So everyone else moved on, and he stayed here. And then every day I would stop there on the way to school and on the way home from school. And he was just such a nice person, and we were lifelong friends. I mean, I've been in touch with him since I met him in 77, and he left ISKON in disgust about a year and a half before I left. And then when I left, we started going to the cultic studies conferences together to talk about ISKON, and we really, you know, renewed our friendship. And, you know, he's just one of my favorite people in the world, and I was so grateful he would be in the movie. I had to really talk him into it. Yeah. So, but he did a really good job for us. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's smart.
And being back here at UCSB now, does it feel kind of full circle?
I love coming to Santa Barbara. Oh my God. If I lived within 100 miles of here, I'd be out here all the time. But yeah, it's definitely full circle to come back here.
Jason, you filmed at New Vrindavan. What was that like? What's there now? I mean, set the scene.
New Vrindavan is there now. It's still an active Krishna community. It's a very isolated very rural little community. I don't know how many people live there now, but yeah, we went there, without permission. With Jacob Young, the documentary filmmaker who appears in the film, was kind of our guide and had been there so often and was so familiar with it. He felt very comfortable sort of leading us on this tour. We didn't use very much footage from the actual community because, it was a very gray area about, filming there without permission, but also wanting to sort of document what was there. But what we did wind up filming was the sort of rotting house of the former, guru who had lived there, Kirtanananda, the monster. And so that was very weird and scary. And it was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was even away from the community. Was this house, up this like overgrown and rotting trail that led to the house. It was a horror movie. And so, the whole crew was on edge, and but the symbolism of the house, this like caved in, temple with like this sky painted on the ceiling that had caved in, and then this nightmarish stairwell down to where the sort of he had this harem of boys living with him. So yeah, it was incredible, and then one of the other things worth mentioning is that we kept the cameras in the vehicles, but we did walk around. Jacob sort of walked us into the temple and the community a little more, and they do have this signage at the community with kind of like a timeline of the history, and they do acknowledge that there was this, period of but the language that they used to describe this time, it was so vague and obfuscated, like the real transgressions that had happened there, like something about falling off the spiritual path or sort of a dark period or something, but really, not acknowledging it doesn't reckon with the past in a way that I think processes or is healthy. And then as another living symbol of it, and this didn't make the film just because or else it would have been 9 hours long, but like one of the other co-founders of the community was someone who had become like a convicted child molester as well. And that person, there was like a memorial gravesite to them, like currently still on the property. And so, there's really has not been a true reckoning with the transgressions that happened, there.
ISKON is clearly not Hinduism. It feels like a hybrid of a bunch of different things. It also feels very American to me. Can you talk about ISKON as a new religious movement basically being born in America?
Yeah. It's funny, I sometimes thought of the story of what had happened as like Eastern values colliding with Western values, and I think Western values won. But it is important to recognize that, the Krishna consciousness, which is what ISKON is the formal sort of a Western institution of, is a very old movement in and of itself. Like Hinduism obviously has been around for thousands of years, but Krishna consciousness is a centuries-old movement on its own. So in that sense, there was nothing, like what Prabhupada brought to America was not new or different from what he himself had practiced in India, and was the descendant of a long line of practitioners of. But certainly after he died and the movement was inherited, some would say usurped, by the men who took over, that became a much more unrecognizable, maybe to Indian practitioners, version of Krishna consciousness, and more about power and control than it was about, enlightenment and, chanting.
You mentioned that your initial approach to the book was to make a dramatic film. If you were going to do that today, how would that be different from the film that we just saw?
Yeah, great question. Can I get back to you? Just kidding. A lot of it would have to do with expanding the scope of the story. Like the book, which I highly recommend for if you enjoyed this film, I highly recommend you read the book. It's got a lot more detail. It's covers a lot more time. But it was interesting to have read the book in 2000, which was the beginning, the dawn of this sort of golden age of television, and there were so many great shows on where there were like 16 main characters, and the time periods were stretched out over these long periods of time, and it was very easy to imagine the story like that because even just limited to what Monkey on a Stick covers, it's like from 67 to 87, it's 20 years. And so we really did a lot of compressing in the movie. And I'm still, I don't think we sacrificed anything. I think we absolutely captured the essence of the book. But in a series, I think you could slow down and do what television does better than feature films, which is dig into character. Mm-hmm. And as you can tell, there are some wild characters in this story. like I want a whole show about Hans Duda, alone. And he's one of 18 fascinating characters in the story. There's a character in the book that didn't even make the movie that named Kanka, who was one of the female devotees, who was the top fundraiser in New York City because she was totally the girl next door. She was from Ohio, and just it's made it so easy for people to join the movement because she was so normal and seemed so approachable, and she of course has this nightmarish journey that she's the one that winds up calling the police in New Vrindavan because she finds out that her son is being abused by Kirtanananda, and so we had to gloss over all of that for the sake of time in the documentary, and to be able to dig into that. I think if you read the book, it's oh yeah, I see the TV show, and it's a lot like Mad Men.
There were a lot more murders than the ones we covered in the movie.
Yeah.
And some of them we did really fast, like the Stephen Boven murder. He was shot 9 times in front of a Newport Beach restaurant by mafia.
Right, yeah.
And there was not enough time.
That's 2 episodes right there.
Yeah, that whole thing with the drug smugglers in Laguna Beach,
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting movie too. But
Totally.
we had to really gloss over that part. It was so complicated.
With the dramatic episodes in this film, what did you do first? Did you do the sort of interviews first? I mean, how did you decide what would be dramatized? How did you cast for that?
Yeah, so we filmed all of the interviews and pulled all of the archival material, and we kind of built the skeleton of the film. And then, we initially had a very different idea for the film. The film was initially going to stop, the documentary portion was going to stop, and it was going to just become just a movie, like as if you had switched channels and were watching a feature film. And interestingly, we sort of discovered an interesting thing about documentary, I think. When we did that, it really fell flat with some of our test audiences, and the feedback we got was this isn't working, and nobody really articulated this, but I feel like what I learned was that when people tune in to watch a documentary, I think they just want to watch a documentary. They don't want to watch a fictional film. And so that led to this process of sort of integrating the documentary and the drama more, where it became you would still hear voiceover while you were watching some of the dramatic material, and sometimes we would cut in and out of it, and so it felt a little bit more like a conventional. In other true crime documentaries, you see it's used more illustratively to sort of visualize the things that you're hearing about, and so we hit more of a middle ground that way. What was the question?
Just sort of how the process worked. What did you do first? How did the casting work?
Right. How did the casting work? Yeah. And how did we decide what to do? And so that was absolutely a function of time and budget. We only had 5 days in order to shoot all of the dramatic material. And so it was this sort of nexus of what do I most want to film? I know I want to film this guy trying to be a rock star who's a Krishna guru. That was on the list from day one. What's achievable? There's one of the things you hear about in the film that we initially planned, we got as far as scouting locations, but when Hans Duda drunkenly gets in a car and drives through Berkeley, shooting up car dealerships and liquor stores from his car, we were going to shoot that because it's so cinematic and insane. but it was a function of budget. We couldn't pull it off because we were a small Canadian documentary. And then also it was what we felt we could do justice to. You know, one of my favorite stories about filming the dramatic material is that Nori was there as our historical advisor, and she literally knew some of the people in like the guys that were selling drugs, you know, and were devotees. You know, those actors are playing people that are friends of Nori's.
Yeah.
And so the actors are coming over to Nori between
They're
takes, and
asking
she's like, you know, he would do that, he would do, you know, like, how do you do? So it was wild to see her interacting with fictional versions of her friends, you know.
I think that they did a really good job with the reenactments. Most of them are just very accurate to what really happened. And things I didn't even know, like when they cut Jayatirtha's head off, the headline came through on the fax, and it was "Man's Head Cut Off." That was the headline. And so my boss goes, "Oh, that's so British." They could have thought of a better headline. And so we were laughing about it. But when we did the movie, because it was just a headline to me at the time.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no headline. Anyway, but so that was a thing that I'm glad that we did that, because I realized when they were filming it, we were in that antique store, and I had to walk over that body, the big cotton body that the guy was stabbing and had the blood all over it. And I go, well, I want to be over here to watch some film. And they go, well, you just have to step over that. And I was like, really? I have to step over that dead body thing? And they go, yeah, we're not going to move it. So and then I was like, oh my God, Jayatirtha dead. And it just hit me like, you know, 30 years later, you know.
It's a real person. And you met him.
Yeah. I knew him.
Yeah.
Everyone, you saw those people around all the time. The gurus would be parading around together, and I saw those people all the time. And I met all those people. It was like those are the people that were the main people in the organization, so everybody knew who they were. Yeah. And Sulochan was someone like a friend I was trying to take care of, and it was really shattering. It really broke me up when they killed him. I couldn't believe that happened. It was just so horrible. It was really discouraging. That was what made me finally leave. And they had a grand jury, and they had a big trial, and it was horrible. Just having to admit that happened. So yeah, kind of sucked.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you. I'm sure the audience will have some. So at this point, Jason and Nori will take questions from the audience. If you have anything you'd like to ask them, I'll turn it over to my colleague Emily Zen, who will take it over from here.
Hey, so we're here from our religious studies class, Metaphysical Spirituality. So first things first, shout out to you.
Is this a test?
No, but we are getting extra credit.
Okay, cool.
So thanks for that documentary. That was some really fun extra credit. But I was wondering if you're comfortable sharing, what is your relationship to spirituality today?
Sure, great question. Yeah, I'll go first if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was raised Anglican. I was an altar boy, and around age 13 or 14, I decided that I didn't believe that. And so I spent most of my life as an atheist. Today, I would say I'm an agnostic, and the key experience I often talk about was on an early film that I worked on, I worked with a woman who was Wiccan. And so I thought, being a young dude, I thought that was hilarious because I was a douche. And so I made fun of her. And she said, well, you know, all Wiccans really believe is that humans don't understand everything. And I was like, oh, I also believe that. And that really stuck with me, like big time. And so I think that makes me an agnostic. Maybe, I'm not. You should tell me, I guess. But so that's about as close as I can come now. There's a humility in that idea that I sort of that is meaningful to me. If that answers your question.
Nice. Yeah, I was never very religious. My mother was an atheist, and my father was agnostic. And I'm kind of like a theocracy, more agnostic. Like, I believe there's something, but we don't know in this life. We can't know exactly what's going on. So, but I believe there's something, and I was always kind of searching. My family was Lutheran, Missouri Synod Lutheran, which is another cult, and you know. But I've always identified as a Lutheran, and you know. But I don't know. I don't know what I believe. I don't believe anything that's like in a organized religion. I don't think I would ever join another organized religion, because it's just, I think it's something people like to do on their own. But I've always been drawn to all kinds of religions. Like when I travel, if there's some cathedrals or some, you know, nice religious places to go to, I'll go there, you know, as a tourist and just sit in the church, maybe light a candle. I like doing stuff like that. So I just, when I got out of ISKON, I just took what I wanted from it, you know, I like the scriptures, and I like the stories and the myth, and I've learned a lot of the Greek myths, and I just love those stories. And I see it like with the Bible, the stories in the Bible. These are like things that have been passed down to us over hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's wisdom in it, and there's stories to help people become better people. So I'm not religious. I would never go back to the Hare Krishnas or anything like that. And I just do my own spiritual stuff myself, but it doesn't have anything to do with anybody telling me what to do, you know. So I just like the freedom of not having to be stuck to one religion, or, you know, believing. You can believe whatever you want. It doesn't matter, I think.
Hi. So first off, I have to say, before coming in here, I guess I wasn't expecting such a high quality production. So kudos to you on the filmmaking. I was very impressed. And then this is a bit of a two-part question. So watching the film, I was struck by how it portrayed both the genuine spiritual aspirations and the darker exploitive elements of the Hare Krishna movement. But I couldn't help wondering, given how some of the more horrific events were dramatized, how do you, as a filmmaker, navigate the line between shedding light on real suffering and potentially sensationalizing it for entertainment or profit? Did you worry at all about the film itself becoming a kind of mirror of the very dynamics it critiques, especially around commodifying belief or trauma?
Wow. Yes. That's an excellent question, and a very valid question. And I think that exact critique was levied at the book. When I read the book and I thought about that, I think I landed on the idea that by dramatizing certain events in the story, they had magnified their emotional power in a way that, you know, angered and incensed me and sort of made the story hit more powerfully. And so I'm a great admirer of the book and its authors, and I think I aspired to the same thing. And so if there is a risk in the dramatization of edging into sensationalism, I was willing to take that risk in the hopes that the trade-off would be to have moved people to not want to let these things happen again. And ultimately, the goal of the film is to just ask people to think critically about their situations that they're in and the organizations that they're in and their belief systems. So, but by the same token, I can't really be surprised if someone says to me, I watched your film and I thought it was sensationalistic. I can't tell anyone they're wrong if they say that. So, yeah, thank you. Great question.
Hi. I remember the Krishnas quite well because I traveled all over the United States at that point in my job, and they would be at the airports, and they'd be in every parade. I don't know, here's the 4th of July or whatever. And I just remember thinking, oh, how annoying these people are. And the way that they looked with their shaved heads and all that, I wondered who on earth would ever join a group like this, And I'm not saying that I'm right. and that everybody's like me. But as you look at people like the organization that David Miscavige has put together, or Prem Rawat, or there's so many of them. What is the hook that drags people in? Or is it, you sort of said that there was a person that they could see from a mile away. Who is that person?
It's a person who doesn't know what they want to do with their life, and they're open to, they're looking for something to be, or to be involved in. And like when I left college, I didn't really have a plan. I didn't want to work at a corporation. I didn't want to get a higher degree at that time. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so they could see that, and they could see that I was kind of a confused, I was, young, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then they came in and gave me a purpose and friends and a place to live and a job. And, so I just thought it was the right thing to do. Like, they convinced me. They love bomb you, and they draw you in.
But in your case, you almost, at least the way it's portrayed in the film, you almost looked at it as a job, as though you had gone to work for a newspaper or an ad agency or whatever. You were just reporting.
Doesn't look that great on your resume after you leave the organization.
Yes.
It really resonated for me in the interviews when Steve Gelbert said in the late 60s, he looked out his window and it was like the Vietnam War was on, and the government was being run by someone who was being accused of crime, and he was just like, no, thank you. What else is there? This clearly isn't working. There must be some other way. There must be some better way. And I think that's ongoing, I just think it's very easy for me to believe that people might be interested in some alternative way of going through life. And the shaving of the head and the robes as a declaration of I'm not part of this. I'm on my own trip over here. I respect that, I don't respect what happened with the Krishnas, but, seekers, I think it's valid, people are still trying to figure this out.
People are still trying to become actors and film producers too, right? And if you look at the percentage of successful ones,
right,
it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So, but thank you very much for your work and for a wonderful, eye-opening film. It was really great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Wonderful job.
Hi there. I'm still trying to digest a lot of the weirdness of the end with the kind of fantasy forgiving sequence, and there was a particular thing that struck my attention where, I don't know if it was you, Jason, saying off camera to Nori, you've got to let yourself off the hook. What struck me about that is that shows up in many other cult documentaries. There's a passage in the Breath of Fire docuseries where the director off camera tells a mother she has to forgive herself. She couldn't have known. I believe there's a similar passage in the Heaven's Gate documentary. So my question is for both of you, why does that happen? I mean, both in the specific case or in general, is it that we can't accept how people can be complicit, how good people can do very serious work to prop up bad organizations? Is it that these historical figures and narrators become characters and that we need good characters just like we need bad characters? Is it the kind of relationships that are formed between directors and producers and these kind of consultants and figures that they're reliant on to make their product?
Where did you get this great audience, Emily? These are great.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm still a little bit ISKONized in my brain. And so Jason and other friends are always like, you should, come on, get out of that. Just forget about, don't be so loyal to them and always protecting them. And I mean, those are my family. It's my spiritual family. I have a big family tree, and this is the part of my tree where they're all criminals, And so, but I love them still. I forgive them, especially the drug smugglers, because they were my friends. They brought us money. So I still have a lot of deprogramming to do of my own brain, And so he was just trying to help me.
So at the point where we filmed that scene, I had been working with Nori pretty closely, intensely for like almost 2 years at that point. And throughout those 2 years, she would very routinely and casually refer to herself as complicit and having colluded and having participated in a criminal conspiracy. And I did not perceive that to be the case. I felt like she had been manipulated and put in an impossible situation. And so during the interview, she once again, referred to herself in this way, and I just snapped, and I was just like, because I felt like, my friend Nori was talking about this other person in a way that I thought was unfair. Anyway, it was never planned to be part of the film, but the editor included it in the edit, and I was like, oh, that sort of works, and we've had a very positive reception to that part of the film. So yeah, that's a really interesting point though about the idea that like the audience wants to have their protagonist be good. But I do feel like in this case that is true.
I try. I wrote a book about it, and I've worked with the children that grew up in ISKON, listened to their stories. And I feel like a calling, to help the children. I don't care if someone joins a cult as an adult. That's what I did. That's just, you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. But when someone's born into the cult and they're raised like that and they're abused and everything, if nothing else, verbally and spiritually abused, and also there was a lot of child abuse. But I feel like it gave me a purpose, out of this horrible mess that I made of my younger life, that I could help people to either not join a cult or get out of a cult, or children that grew up in cults. So I feel like it's given back to me. Like I did that experience, and now I'm getting things back from it, being able to help other people.
On the one hand, I think you have an amazing amount of integrity to take ownership over that and take responsibility for it, but as an outside observer, it is my opinion that you were manipulated.
Let's argue about this later.
Yeah. Just watch that scene again.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining us, and please join me in thanking Jason and Nori for this great conversation.